So, I wasn't here last week, but the week before I gave a talk about how to be happy. This I didn't fully answer the question, but I tried. And so we're going to keep at it. And we're looking at a sutta that's in the Pali Canon, the scriptures of Theravada Buddhism from Southeast Asia. And it's in a very old book, the Sutta Nipada. And the Sutta Nipada has 5 chapters, and it's in the 4th chapter, the second sutta. And it's an old sutta and a very loved sutta. On Sutta Central, the website, there are 6 translations of this sutta, and I know of a couple more. So it's an old sutta, it's a loved sutta, and there's good reason. And I very much want us to go through it, and I'll make a case for that. And the first thing is the subject matter of happiness. It's a very worthwhile topic. Yeah, the Deva comes to the Buddha and says, Devas are concerned for happiness and ever long for peace, and the same is true of humankind. What then are the things that make up happiness? How do you live a good life? What does it look like? What is that? And then the Buddha goes on to answer. And really, the Buddha is describing the Eightfold Noble Path. But in this like human version, this lived out version. And I think it's extremely useful for us to look at it because for the most part, this sutta is describing a lay life. The very end of the sutta there's one stanza about living a monastic life, and that this is the absolute highest blessing if you have experiences that are awakening experiences. But there's a long path to that point. And what's beautiful about this sutta is that it's very relatable. The Buddha's describing going to work, and having a family and taking care of your children and friendships and qualities of the heart. And I think it's wonderful for us to realize that there's no conflict, that this is our spiritual life. Well, I'm parenting my children. This is there's not a conflict. It's not like I meditate in the morning and then I do everything else in my life. Though our whole life comes onto the path, and our whole life it can be filled with Dhamma and filled with beauty and filled with purpose and meaning. And there are things that are sources of happiness. The Buddha says it outright. And hopefully there's no guilt or conflict when I'm connecting well with my partner. This is very, very wholesome. This is very, very beautiful. And it takes a lot of work and wholesomeness in the heart for that to really happen. And that is part of living a good life, and that is part of our spiritual practice. So tonight, we'll look at the first 2 verses that the Buddha says. And it basically is the first 2 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path: right view and right intention. And what does this look like when I'm living my life? So there's six points. Each verse has 3 things that the Buddha says, and then this refrain, really: these are the highest blessings. And then the second verse, again, another 3, and then this refrain: these are the highest blessings. This is what makes up a good life. So the first verse talks about avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, and honoring those worthy of honor. So this first component, avoiding those of foolish ways. What does this mean, and how do we do this? I think the first thing is just to get honest with ourselves, to start really taking stock. When I spend time with person X, how do I feel? What's it like? What's it like after? What are the things that I end up thinking about? What are the things that we do together? And if you were really honest with ourselves, we can come up with the answer. Like, this particular relationship brings out parts of me, habits that I'm realizing aren't that great for me anymore. I don't feel that great. It's not actually energizing. It's not actually wholesome. It leaves me with some niggling feelings or some regrets or some resentments or some agitation. If this is true, then this is what the Buddha is talking about in this sutta. To try and start to minimize and rearrange things, that you're not spending as much time with people that are depleting or not bringing out the best in you. And sometimes, of course, this is unavoidable because this person is your mother, or this person is your boss, or this person is your roommate, and so we can't just, oh, I don't feel good. So, I mean, that's not what the Buddha is suggesting. We want to do things consciously and carefully. But yes, if we start to get really serious about our spiritual practice, serious about our hearts, serious about our minds, it does ripple out into our relationships. And sometimes there'll be some changes in some of those relationships. And we'll spend less time with certain people and more time with other people. Um, and if this is, your boss or your office mate or your brother, some relationship that I can't avoid this relationship. This is set. This is in my life. Then we can do the next tier, which is, okay, well, I can't completely avoid this person, but maybe I can avoid the foolishness, or I can become more aware of it and work with it. For example, gossip. This is something we all deal with. And we know it doesn't feel that great. Brene Brown calls it counterfeit connection. It's counterfeit connection at the expense of somebody else and somebody else's reputation. And we've all, okay, I won't say we've all, I've had the experience more than once where I'm involved in a conversation that is, definitely borderline. Like, should we be saying all this stuff about this person? And then that person walks in the room, and then I know, oh, wait, I wouldn't have been talking like this if that person had been present. This is gossip. And so it's good to think through, well, what am I going to do when someone starts gossiping? And speaking with different practitioners, one thing we can do is just to stay silent. When someone says something a little bit enticing or a little bit negative about somebody, if you just stay silent, it's kind of like it lands on Teflon and it just slides down and it doesn't get any momentum. And if that doesn't work, you can be a little bit more proactive and then maybe say something more positive about this individual. And this also, I was in a situation where someone that was, had authority over me and was my superior, was very often talking about this another person that we were all in relationship with in a negative light. And I just constantly countered with something very positive. And it wasn't hard. This was someone I dearly loved. So it was very easy. It came very naturally. And I think because of that, because it wasn't forced and it was very real, it just, but it didn't stop the habit. She kept going and kept going. She sort of didn't get it. But it never did, we never did gossip because it just stopped. And another thing we can do when someone's gossiping is to actually be honest. And this is, you need to be careful about this. This is more vulnerable. This isn't for every situation. You need to consider the power, not with your boss. You need to consider the power dynamics of the relationship. But one thing you can do is say, you can just, uh, when we're trying to address things that are unwholesome, if we keep the statements as personal and I statements, it can come across quite a bit less judgy. It's still difficult. It's still dicey because you can kind of look holier than thou, and you don't want to do that. But so it's something that you can entertain trying, to say something like, um, I'm really trying to stop. I'm really trying to stop talking about people when they're not present or something like that, really, um, or maybe even more vulnerable, only if it's true, obviously, be like, I I have my own challenges with this person. And so, and I'm trying to work on my connection with them and work on my relationship with them. So it super doesn't help me when I hear other negative talk about them. I mean, that doesn't, to me, that does not sound holier than thou. That sounds vulnerable. And obviously that's quite specific. That's only going to be work in certain situations. This trying to, when you can't avoid someone, trying to avoid the foolishness that happens in their company and the foolishness that happens in the relationship. And foolishness really is like the unhealthy parts, the unbeneficial, unconstructive. And just to get really open, um, feels embarrassing because I was so old when it happened. But I'm the baby of the family. I'm number four, and I just watched, difficulty with my siblings. And so my little life strategy was to just be the golden child. And I never set boundaries with my parents. I never really was honest and spoke up. I just did anything they wanted. I was such a people pleaser. Such a powerful survival strategy in my life, and it just has wreaked havoc. And finally, I come to the Buddha's teachings in my late 40s, and then I heard, uh, and I had been in therapy and write all those little letters to my lay name was Robin, dear little Robin. None of it worked, it didn't. Because certain things were not strong enough and not clear enough. And then I heard a monk, Ajahn Sona, say, it was just this casual comment, but it just became this lightning rod for me to change. Said, not good for you, not good for me. And suddenly this little phrase gave me enough momentum to start speaking up because I just didn't have enough self-worth to speak up for myself. But if I realized, oh, this unhealthy habit, this unhealthy pattern that I have in this relationship, it's not good for them. It's not good for them to, they were at this point, I was had a long commute. I had teenage children, and my parents' health was failing, and they had me doing their grocery shopping and doing their laundry. I was cooking dinner for them once a week, and I was exhausted. And I remember standing in this grocery store with their grocery list, so mad, like so resentful, and realizing like this is just so not okay. I'm not doing it for any of the right reasons, none of the right reasons. And so then finally, I'm 50 years old. I stand up to my parents. And of course, it was absolutely awful. I mean, they were so mad because I'd never done it. They were like, all the things that I had worried about and have tried to avoid my entire life came came true. And it was short-lived. It was a few days, and everything was so much better. I stopped doing all this support for them, and then they got more realistic about where they were really at, and they moved into assisted living, and it was happily ever after. And they're both dead, but happily ever after and it's still happy. They had really good deaths. Like, it was beautiful, and it was real because I had finally showed up in the relationship. So yeah, and it can be really hard when it's a very entrenched relationship, very, very hard and doable and absolutely necessary for our own development and our own growth. So can't always avoid foolish people, but we can avoid foolish ways and try and bring in the ways of interacting and ways of being together that are much more beneficial and wise. Which brings me to the second thing, this associate with the wise. It's such an important part of the path, a crucial part. In fact, this sutta that gets quoted all the time in the Connected Discourses, book 45, Sutta 2, where Ananda comes to the Buddha. I figured it out. I figured it out. It's half the holy life is, wise association. And the Buddha's like, mm-mm, mm-mm, it's the whole thing, 100%. And it really is. It's 100% of the path is wise association, because we need this different input, and we need this someone to point us in this different direction, and then walk with us and show us how. Wise association, associate with the wise. So again, we just take stock. Like, how do I feel when I'm with this person? And if you feel better, if you feel inspired, if you feel encouraged, if you feel seen, if you feel safe, if you feel like uh, strength inside, this is a good thing. Hang out with this person. This is a wise person that's bringing out beautiful qualities in you and helping you associate with the wise. And again, we're so many of us are so busy. How do I do this? Coming tonight, this is one way to do it. And then making friendships within the group. This is also very, very useful. A couple weeks ago, I think it was a couple weeks ago, somebody was here, and this happens sometimes, people are sort of hanging around, and of course, oh, she wants to talk to me. No. So I go up to, no, she was waiting to talk to the woman that I was talking to, because they were planning a walk together. And, this is great. I'm so happy. Yeah, it's wonderful. And certain members in our community invite people over and have dinners. And this is wonderful. Ways to connect, and just do things that you're already doing, but do them with members of the community. Go hiking, go canoeing with members of the community, things you're already doing. Wise association, it makes a huge difference. It's just this reset, this reminder. And then also, it's great to talk about things that are going well and then talk about things that aren't going as well. And we get all kinds of ideas and tips from one another. And again, we can bring more wisdom into the relationships that we already have, the friendships that we already have. That person doesn't necessarily need to be starting to meditate or daily meditating. You still can bring wisdom into that relationship. And that interview with Beth Upton last week that we showed part of, where she talks about bringing in more of the wholesome parts. So yeah, you've got friends and you're hiking, and this is what brings you together. Then you can you in your own heart, in your own mind, can be emphasizing the wholesome parts of that interaction. That you're out in nature and you're practicing being empathetic. You're practicing listening. All the different ways that you can bring more wholesomeness and more wisdom into those activities. And then the third thing in this first stanza, which is really about this right view, is honoring those worthy of honor. It's such an interesting thing that the Buddha points out to, that this is part of happiness, part of a good life, knowing what to honor. You look at our culture honors youth and beauty. When we have these late night TV, all they have on is movie stars, and fame. What do we honor? And candor, fitness and adventures. These are some of the things that really, are held up high. And many, this is I would put fitness and adventure over fame. This is good, better. And we can do even better, to really honor people that are worthy of honor, that are developing internal qualities of patience, of forgiveness. Sometimes when I really want to get inspired, I'll go on websites about restorative justice. I find this the most inspiring. So inspiring. Some woman who, this young man shoots her son, and then she forgives that person and takes them into her heart. Sometimes even takes them into her home. It just amazing things that we can really honor. It's very interesting. There's a sutta in the numerical discourses in the Book of Fives, and the first four things, it's sutta number 236. The first four things, super interesting that the Buddha talks about this, about taking time to investigate and scrutinize so that we dispraise things that should be dispraised, and that we praise things that should be praised. And the third thing is, again, with this investigating and scrutinizing, that we're suspicious of things that we should be suspicious of. And the fourth is that we believe things that we should believe. And it takes this investigation and scrutinizing. My son is a scientist, and not long ago, we're having a conversation. I'm talking about investigate. Not long ago, we're having a conversation, and he said, quote, "I don't think that's true. What you're about to say," preemptively arguing with me. I don't think he was following that sutta. But I toyed with whether or not to, throw him under the bus in this talk. And honestly, he said, and it's true. He does know me extremely well, and he did know what I was about to say. And he did actually. So that's the other part of the story, is that he did know what I was going to say, and he didn't agree with it. But yeah, taking time to scrutinize and to look at our lives, like what, and look into our hearts. What do we really, really honor? So the second verse in that the Buddha is talking about the good life, happiness. The next three things are about living in places of suitable kind with the fruits of past good deeds, and setting ourselves in the right direction. This is the right intention, part of the Eightfold Noble Path. And this, the Buddha is just saying to enjoy, to rejoice, to be grateful that we live here, that we live in Canada. This is something to be extremely grateful for. Extremely. There's so many other places in the world that are not, they're not nearly as suitable for spiritual practice. And the fact is that this is where we are. And according to the Buddhist teachings, that there is this that we're experiencing the fruit of past good deeds. And this is something that we should take stock in and rejoice in. Living in places of suitable kinds. It's amazing. There's a sutta in the numerical discourses in the Book of Eights, sutta number 29, called Inopportune Moments. And the Buddha is describing 8 situations where it's not a suitable place, where you miss the Buddha's teachings. It's a big, big deal that we're here and that we're being exposed to the Buddha's teachings. These 8 inopportune moments are you're reborn in the 3 lower realms, in a hell realm, an animal realm, a ghost realm. The 4th one, you're reborn in a Deva realm, but your life is so long that you miss the whole show. You miss the whole arising of the Buddha, the whole thing. It starts and ends, and you're still just, mind you would be having a great time, but then that karma wears out, and who knows where you go after that. That's the 4th. And then the other 4 are one where you're reborn, you get a human body, you get a human life, but you're living somewhere where you don't get exposed to the teachings. And the other 2, the next 2, you've got this human life and the teachings are around, but you just don't get it, like you. And I had that experience when I was 17. I heard the Buddhist teachings. I was in a comparative religion class, and I thought they were crazy. I'm not kidding. I thought, life is suffering. This is ridiculous. This is awful. I seriously remember that. And then karma, I thought that was horrible. Like, it's like blame the victim. And yeah, I did not get it at all. And then I had 30 years of just pain, sorrow, dejection, lamentation, grief, and despair. And then I thought the Buddhist teachings were right on. Yeah, wow, dang. Yeah, and then the 8th of this inopportune moments is you have this human birth, and there's no Buddha. There's no, and there's so many so much of human history, that's been the case. There's not been a Buddha. And here we are. I want to read it. It's the Buddha goes on in this sutta and says, "For many inopportune times are spoken of, occasions obstructive to the path. For it is only sometimes, on occasion, that Buddhas arise in the world. If one has directly encountered them, fortune rarely gained in the world. If one has obtained the human state and the good Dhamma is being taught, for a person desiring their own good, this is incentive enough to strive." That's Anguttara 8, 29. And with the fruits of past good deeds, this is a little bit more of right view. I'm going on and on. And, there's this initial right view. There's this intellectual, conceptual right view that gets you going on the spiritual path. And it's, the Buddha's explicit, it's to understand that generosity makes a difference. Makes a difference when we're generous and when we give, and that there is cause and effect. There is, what I do matters. There are repercussions, and the last part. So this is basically in trusting about generosity, trusting about karma and cause and effect. And the last one is to really trust that awakening is possible and that there are awakened beings that are living it and are pointing the way. And the last thing is to set ourselves in the right direction. These are the highest blessings. And this is the right intention. And yeah, I said there are six translations of this sutta on Sutta Central. And this particular one, I don't like actually the translation about being guided by the rightful way. I think that, which is what we chanted, the translation that we have. I'm going to read the ones from Sutta Central. Ajahn Brahmali translates it, to apply oneself in the right way. Ananda Jyoti translates it as having the right aspiration for oneself, this right intention. And Bhante Sujato, being rightly resolved in oneself. And Piyadasi, and to set oneself in the right direction. And Narada, and to set oneself in the right course. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, and directing oneself rightly. All six of those are more accurate to the Pali. This idea of getting going in the right direction. And again, this idea of honoring those that are truly worthy of honor, following those truly worthy of being followed, and setting oneself in the right direction, this right intention. I'm headed in the right way. There's this crazy sutta in the numerical discourses where the Buddha is talking to an attendant that's not Ananda. It's an attendant, Nagita, is attendant for a short time. And basically, the Buddha is saying, he sees this monk, and this monk is sitting very upright and is clearly in pretty deep meditation. But the monk is, the environment that the monk has put himself in is not that great. And he's close to things that are quite enticing and a lot of distraction. And the Buddha talks about him and compares him to this other monk who's sitting in a much better environment, secluded in a forest, and he's sort of, falling asleep. And the Buddha praises the monk falling asleep more than the monk that's in deep meditation. Because of, and the Buddha says, because of where he's situated himself and where he's heading. It's almost more important where we're heading than where we are. Setting ourselves on the right course. An interesting sutta. And Ajahn Brahm, this idea of right intention, has this beautiful shorthand of make peace, be kind, be gentle. If we're setting ourselves and we're talking to ourselves like that, and we're reminding ourselves of this beautiful intention of renunciation and non-ill will and non-confusion, make peace, be kind, be gentle. This is right intention. We're setting ourselves on the right course. So I will stop talking now.